Hey potties, it's been a big week. It here has officially been Easter and I've eaten a lot of chocolate and it's been great and I've really loved it. But one of the most exciting things that happened to me over Easter, well, there were two actually. Well, actually, no, there were three. Here I am with my favorite list of exciting Easter happenings. One, obviously, Sam came home. Yay! Which I talked about earlier this week in the Monday episode, which is very exciting. Two, Easter eggs. Oh my God, brilliant. I just love that we have an entire holiday that is dedicated to chocolate. Three, I was on Good Morning Britain. Whoop, whoop. Okay, admittedly, that was like last week. But in case you haven't seen me on television debating all of the interesting things, this time was working smarter, how working fewer hours can make you more productive. Then you can go over to smartlyself.com/press. You can see me making my debut, well, not my debut, but my second debut on Good Morning Britain with the lovely Richard Madeley and Kate Garraway. So it was all very exciting. It was like an exciting early morning start and I had to be up and it was like, there's all the things going on. And actually I love being on Good Morning Britain. I love being on television. One, because it's really cool. You get to go into the studio and feel like a celebrity. But the second thing is that they do your hair and makeup for you. Love that. If somebody could just move into my house and do that for me, I may actually get out of my pajamas on a regular basis. Who knew? Anyway, most importantly, so I guess there were four things on my list instead of two or three. I managed to squeeze in a last minute interview with somebody that I'm really excited about. And it is somebody that we've had people email us and say that they'd love to have or hear a conversation between me and this person. And they were able to record on what was supposed to be my week off. I was like, no, we're going to do it. And then we're going to release the episode super quickly for you because, and we'll talk about it in the podcast conversation, I'm sure, but they have something really cool that's coming up that will be of interest to all of you budding authors in the community. So yeah, today I'm talking with the amazing Mike Michalowicz, and we had a really good discussion actually. It did not go in the direction I was expecting. And there are a few reasons for that. Generally, I think when people think about Mike, they think about profit first. And when I initially sent out my little email pitch, because I do this, when I want someone on the podcast, I pitch them, of course. But when people think about Mike, they think about profit first. And being in the UK and, not being an accountant type person, I trust my accountant with all things money. And so profit first was never really a big thing for me. It just wasn't. What became a big thing for me was when he launched his most recent book, Clockwork. And I loved it, like legitimately obsessed by it, actually bought other people copies of it, which is what I do when I really like something. And I really, really enjoyed it. There were certain concepts in Clockwork that I just thought were absolutely phenomenal. And we share a few later on in the show. But when we started talking and when I was talking to Mike pre-hitting record, we were talking about, it'd be great if we could have a discussion about a little bit of this and about a little bit of that. And then when we actually came to having the discussion, we went in almost a completely different direction than normal. And this is really, really interesting to me. So we have the amazing Mike Michalowicz, who is famed for incredible books, who actually is talking about building a business as an author. And it's really interesting. So if you're somebody who has ever considered writing a book, or you're thinking that you already have a book and, what is the reality of writing New York Times bestsellers and all of this kind of thing, then today's conversation, you're really going to enjoy it no matter what level of author you are. It genuinely is so interesting. I've had lots of ideas just from recording it about what I could potentially do with my book and future books. So for the eagle-eared among you, yes, future books, they are coming out. And it was just a really, really cool conversation. Mike is a really lovely guy, and we've had some really interesting points raised around what it's really like to write a book, what money can really be made, how we can be of service and of best service to our audience. And there were some giggles around pronunciations of particularly difficult surnames as well. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode. It is a goodie. And like I say, if you want to see what I look like with makeup and hair done at 6:30 a.m. 2 6:30s in a day, then make sure you head over to smartleadersell.com/press and you can see my latest appearance on Good Morning Britain. Okay, poddies, how exciting is this? We are finally at this episode, which I know you've all been waiting for because we've had multiple emails about it, which makes me very excited and very honored to have the amazing Mike Michalowicz on the podcast today.
Jessica, thank you. Mine's the amazing part. I don't know if that's true, but it is an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited. And I also have to say that I love your website because when I went on your website, I got to click the little button to make sure I was going to say your name correctly. So thank you for installing that because it was a big fear of mine.
It is the most, because it's my name, it seems to be the most bastardized name ever. People constantly mispronounce it. And I actually found out that I'm mispronouncing it. It's of Polish/Ukrainian descent. I pronounce it Michalowicz, but I met a Ukrainian gentleman who said, no, it's Michalowicz. Oh. And so perhaps I'm even pronouncing it wrong.
Well, perhaps if you go to like Ukraine or somewhere, you'll have to join it. That's amazing. Well, I'm really excited about today. And I know that everybody who has kind of emailed and taken some time out to let us know how excited they are about having you on the podcast have a few directions that they want this to go, which has been really interesting, from what is Mike's favorite color.
Okay.
I know, random. All the way through to, how long does it really take to write books like Profit First and Clockwork and what actually goes into that. So, I mean, color, I'm really sorry, Debbie, whoever you are, it's just not floating my boat right now, but maybe we'll come back to it later on. So if we just start with the book stuff, that would be awesome. Why books as your medium, and how long does it really take to crank a good one out?
Yeah. So what I found is that I don't think I'm a necessarily good writer. I do it out of a labor of love, and it just takes me a long time. In fact, it takes me about 5 years to write a book, which seems odd because I turn out books pretty regularly, but right now I'm working on 4 books in different stages. I have one coming out in 2020.
Wow.
And yeah, and the medium for books is, I found that it's a powerful communication platform, particularly nowadays with the advancements in audio with Audible and different platforms, that people will put much more validity in what I'm saying and sharing when it's documented in a book, as opposed to just delivering it via speech. So I found the medium is very powerful. And I see the power of books, and that's why I do it. It is a labor, but I also realize that I have a talent that I can leverage, which is making complex concepts simple. And I do that, by the way, because I consider myself a simpleton. I really struggle. I don't understand like how accounting works. I struggle with it. So I create a system to make that simple. And same thing with business efficiency and all these different elements of entrepreneurship. And I think the best vehicle to deliver a simple system is through a book, because then you have all the notes in front of you and you can revisit it over and over again until you've mastered it yourself.
I really like that. And I think it's also nice with books because you can always pick up where you left off and you can highlight. And that's the thing for me.
Yeah.
Weirdly, even though I have a podcast and I love recording it, I love reading a book a day and I will highlight. And so nobody can ever borrow my books because they look like they've been massacred. But it's really useful for me because I can always flick back and go, oh yeah, that was what I was thinking. Or I always meant to record that episode on whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I think it's so interesting.
There's a joke about us Americans, and it says, how do you keep a secret from an American? And the answer is, you put it in a book. Because sadly, historically, we as an American society are not known for our reading and our studying. I hope that's changing. I think in the entrepreneurial space, it isn't true. But what's so unique about a book is a well-written book, I believe, is the author's intent is to share all of their knowledge. It is literally all the notes that have been sucked out of their brain, and they put it in paper for you. They've taken the notes for you and they deliver it to you for like under $20. It is I don't see any more valuable medium on this planet than a book. It's all the content you could ever desire. It is thought out and structured. Now, from an author's perspective, because I've lived in this space for so long now, it's a risky venture. For many authors, they are not financially successful. I mean, I would say 99.9% of authors write books. They put their their soul into making an extraordinary book and giving extraordinary content, and the book doesn't sell. To make money as an author, you have to sell thousands, in many cases over 10,000 books just to break even with the effort of time and money invested into it. And to make money in this industry, you have to sell hundreds of thousands of books. So that's just a known risk that we as authors have to walk into this space with, knowing that we're really gambling if we want this to be a vocation, a way to make a living for ourselves. But conversely, as consumers of books, it is the best deal you'll ever get.
And that's the thing, isn't it? If you actually implement the information contained in a book, most authors, like you say, they're putting their very best information into a book. So if you've got the self-motivation to sit there and really implement and execute yourself, you can get an awful lot from books other than just, oh, this is a good read. That was kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, that's exactly true. And you know what I also found, Jessica, is that I look for what I call the common thread. So I will read books around a challenge I'm facing or a problem I want to resolve. I'm really curious about my own habits right now. So I've read books like The Power of Habit. Charles Duhigg wrote that. A recent favorite, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And as I'm reading these books, there is a lot of overlap, which is good because now I'm seeing kind of themes over and over again. Then I look for what I call the common thread. And the common thread is, of all the overlap I see, which elements resonate with me the most and I can stitch into my business or my life. And of those books, I may read the 200 pages per book, but there may be 2 paragraphs that are really ultimately relevant. And as I read more books in this space, I find those 2 common paragraphs throughout these books. And I say, okay, this is what's resonating with me. This is what I feel most strongly about. This is what I'm going to implement. And it's that one game-changing idea that I read across many books that really is life-changing for my life personally or for my business. But for me to really absorb it, it just requires me to digest the information many ways in many different forms from, in this case, many different authors.
I love that. And I think it's actually really nice and it's quite refreshing to hear somebody say that they enjoy and actually action books now. Because like you say, a lot of people, we don't read as much anymore, especially with new content mediums that come into play with everybody's got video or they've got caption video if they don't want to watch somebody talking or listen to it. And we've got podcasting. But I think there is something really tangible about having a book in front of you, being able to highlight it and being able to take away. And there is something to be said for being smart enough to take away the bits that apply to you right now and the bits that you want to save for later on.
It invokes what I call pacing. So I love audiobooks, and there is a challenge though. I can consume the content faster, but it's a passive experience. If my mind drifts while I'm listening to an audiobook, the book continues on and I start missing elements. The traditional sit down with, with a spot of tea and be reading through a book allows my mind to go down its necessary paths of considering the implications to my own life and my own business. I take pause. So when I read a book in the traditional sense, a hardcover book that I'm flipping through, it may take me a good 2-3 minutes to read a page. I may revisit that page 4 times over. I may close the book momentarily and let my mind wander and say, what are the implications for me? So the traditional sense of reading a book, and I guess this is true for Kindle too, an electronic version, I think our mind acts differently, and it's much more, there's much more consideration and thought going into it. So even though I don't read traditional books as much, I rely on Audible. I'll find when a topic is of significance to me, I need to revisit it in a written format because the way I'll consume it will be radically different.
And I think that's really interesting. It actually brings me onto something that I listened and absorbed on your Clockwork podcast fairly recently about this idea of superhero syndrome, and where I'm kind of going with this is that the link here is tenuous, but it's popped into my brain. But you were talking about this idea of superhero syndrome, which I'll get you to explain it in a second because you're much better at explaining than I am. But this idea that reading a book is not a passive experience. It's something that we can be proactive and actively doing as an activity. What we seem to have come onto in the online space is this idea that we should be spoon-fed consistently with bite-sized chunks of information and so on. And so that's meaning that people are finding it more difficult, perhaps be more proactive about their own learning and about where they take that.
It's funny. I've been looking at some historical artisans, and there is a statue dedicated to, I would argue, the most important element or activity in all of humanity, and yet it's being disregarded today. There's a statue called The Thinker. And so here's this naked guy sitting there with his chin on his fist, just contemplating. And I think sadly today, we are so caught up in what's next, what do we need to do now, and consume faster and faster, thinking that gives us the advantage when it doesn't. Like, there is no statue called The Doer, like some guy just pulling his hair out in pure panic. There's a statue called The Thinker. And I want that to be a reminder to us that there is power in pause. There's power in consuming and contemplating. And that's why I'm such a fan of books. And I'm also grateful because I see the inside track of book consumption. I can see how many people are reading my books, and a lot of my contemporaries and I share this knowledge with each other. It's on the rise. And when I say on the rise, traditional book reading, paper books or Kindle books, if you want to be environmentally more responsible, those books, the consumption's actually increasing. In the same breath, the consumption of Audible's increasing too. So it's not that books are surging back, but the demand for print books is still out there. So I feel emboldened by that people inherently appreciate the need and the power in pause to consume, digest, and contemplate. And I see it's out there. I'm just rallying against this go, go, go mentality that exists through the web, where everything is a tweet length of consumption and we're off to the next thing. I think that actually is hurting us. We got to become more thinkers than doers.
And I really like that, because I guess the question is there a right time for people to write a book as an entrepreneur? Because one of the things that strikes me is that there are lots of people who have a big message. And I get this with a lot of my clients. They're like, Jess, I really want to write a book. And I'm like, that's great. But, are you making enough money currently to write a book? Like you were saying earlier, it does cost money and time. And time is the big component.
Yeah.
So is there a good time for an entrepreneur to write a book? Is it that they start out with that as a primary model? Or is this something that people need to be more strategic about and sharing their big message later down the line?
So before I share what my thoughts are, I just want to identify my own bias. I believe in books more than anything because I can see the impact it has on others. And it's also been life-changing for me as an author. So when someone says, I need to write a book, or my friends are telling me to write a book, I feel like grabbing them by their shoulders and say, write that book. For God's sake, write the book. So that's my bias. And I believe it so much. The only project I'm doing outside the scope of serving entrepreneurs is I'm doing a class for aspiring and existing authors to get their books out there, because I believe in it that much. I do believe, just based upon our conversation, that change and improvement in people's lives is affected most by books. And I believe most people have something they need to share. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a brand new concept, but it's probably a brand new flavor around a concept, their own perspective and storytelling. And there's two components to what I deem a successful book. First of all, we need to put our soul into it. So when it comes to timing, when should I write my book? It's when are you ready to devote yourself to putting everything into this book? If it's a quick money grab, or you just want to have a stack of paper you can throw down on someone's desk as a glorified business card, but don't care about the content so much, I don't know if that's a calling to do a book. But if you have something that can truly be of service to other people, and you're willing to make the effort to put it in paper or on paper, then I think that's the time to do it, is now. We, meaning the general population, needs more great books. There's a second component too, though, that's sadly missed. I have discovered many books that I believe are extraordinary and no one's buying them. I found them by pure happenstance, or kind of a side comment someone made in a conversation and said, oh yeah, I remember hearing about this book that no one knows about. And I read the book and said, oh my God, this is fabulous. The second part of authorship is marketing. When I wrote my first book, I had the realization, more of a punch to the face, that a book is like a cereal box. And if you go to the local food store and you're looking to buy cereal, there is, particularly the store down the street from us, there must be like 30 cereals to choose from, sometimes hundreds. If you go to a mega store, how do you make your cereal stand out? Well, in authorship, if you go to your bookstore, it's not one of 100, it's one of tens of thousands. So the competition for attention is, I think, at the highest degree for books. A book is a product. It's an information. It's the oldest school information product of all time. And the competition is staunch. Therefore, we must distinguish and market our book. Now, there's an advantage too of this competition, but we need to make sure that our book is noticed and that the community that it can serve is aware of it. So authorship is producing a book that's remarkable, putting your soul into it. And if you feel called to do that, this is the time. Go into it. Don't wait another moment, I feel. And then it's the marketing of it. It's a perpetual effort of getting the word out. The last thing I wanted to share, which is I think my greatest revelation since I've become an author, is this is the only market I've discovered that the more that your competitors, and I'm doing air quotes around it, the more that your competitors sell their books, the more it actually serves you. What I found is the more people buy books in the categories I'm writing, Clockwork is in business efficiency. So one popular book is called E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Another one's called Traction by Gino Wickman. Amazing, amazing books. And they're of amazing service to my efforts because every time someone buys Traction or E-Myth and falls in love with the concepts, that person's probably saying, how do I dig deeper? How do I learn more about this? What else exists? And they start looking for complementary books. Hopefully Clockwork, that's my book, would be one of them. So I found is the more that other books sell that are good books, the more it elevates readers to want to read more and the more potential they have to discover me or you. So the great thing about being an author is you actually want the success of your quote unquote competitors and they want your success because it elevates everybody.
So I think this is really interesting because I really like the quote, rising tide lifts all boats. And that's what it feels like from what you're saying is, yeah, actually, when it comes to authorship, if that's your primary method almost of getting your message out to your audience, then actually it really helps if your competitors are selling better, then so are you, and you're getting recommended and things. I guess what's the mindset around that piece that everybody inherently has, that little green-eyed monster of, oh my goodness, but what if they love X person's book more than they love mine?
Yeah. So I found there's actually a label for that. It's called being a human being. So if you feel threatened or something like that, it sounds like you're totally normal. So this is good. And that's how I felt when I went in. I felt that when I wrote my first book, it was called The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, a very kind of contrarian, aggressive title, at least at the time, on entrepreneurship. And I felt that if I made someone aware of a book, I got to sell my book and disregard or diminish others, usually disregard, not even make mention of them. And what I found was two things. First of all, is some people would oblige and buy my book and read it and like it and fall in love with it. And then they call me and say, Mike, this is so great. I need more. What else have you done? Or what else can you share with me? And if I didn't continue the conversation, said, well, I haven't written anything else and there's nothing else you can read, it was too blunt. And they actually disengaged. They didn't have that energy or momentum building. So I realized pretty early on and said, well, I haven't written anything else, but I love, whatever books, E-Myth and so forth. Like I mentioned earlier, Purple Cow, if it comes to marketing. And then people say, Mike, this is amazing. What else do you know? And they actually built more trust the more I referred them to other people's books. So that was powerful. I also realized that the faction of people read my book and they actually don't like it. Like, oh, this book sucks. It doesn't resonate with me. And if I didn't give them an outlet to find something else, they're disenchanted and maybe done. But if I said, listen, here's a collection of books, mine's just one in this category, that I again was building trust. Someone that says, you know what, your book really doesn't resonate with me, but Mike, you were willing enough to share someone else's book. I'm willing to explore and come back to you again when you do your next book. So I found that people that love you or hate you, either way, if you're truly serving them their best interest and expanding their knowledge base, you become the trusted source and they come to you. But I found there's actually like data behind how this works. In Amazon, who's such a dominant force now globally for selling books, it's interesting. Every time I've promoted someone else's book, there was this guy who wrote a book called Giftology, John Rulin. I read this book. I had no idea who the author was personally, but I said, this book is a must read. It is such a powerful, practical map to this concept of reciprocity. I have to let my constituency of readers know about this. And so I sent out an email to my list to saying, read this book at all costs. And you know what, even skip my book to put this one on top because it is that good. And I noticed on Amazon, all of a sudden, my books were selling with Giftology, which weren't even necessarily a tight link. But Giftology and the Pumpkin Plan was selling in parallel. And what I discovered is that when I share openly about my suggestions of other books, that some of my readers will buy that book and also say, oh, I haven't picked up Mike's yet. I'm going to buy this book. And now these books run in parallel, which meant that if someone discovered Giftology, not through me, but just through Amazon, that they're seeing it packaged with my book. So from that measurement of marketing, recommending other people's books actually amplified more sales on the Amazon platform.
That's really cool. And that's something that I think, we don't think of, because when you start to think about it, I mean, unless you look at the rise of affiliate marketing over the last 5 or 6 years, you tend to think if you start promoting your competitors, that it is going to be a kind of thankless exercise. They're going to make a ton of money, or they're going to sell a load of books, or they're going to achieve something, maybe hit the chart on Amazon again, and you're just going to be sat there. But that's actually a really, really interesting way to look at it. So perhaps if you're not, as thoughtful as Mike, and you're thinking, well, actually, I'd quite like to get my book up and promote it a little bit. Maybe don't look at promoting other people's work as being thankless, and maybe choose things that are congruent to your book, but not necessarily competitive. They don't have to be competitive to be something that your audience would still enjoy.
What's interesting? I find, regardless of whatever the current marketing trend or fad is, that if we consistently do what we truly believe is in the best interest of the people we're serving, our clients, our readers, or whatever, if we truly do what's in their best interest, it just seems that ultimately it works out, that you don't really ever shoot yourself in the foot. Even I think if Amazon didn't say, oh, now we're going to package these books together, I think I strengthen the relationship with my readers by just being earnest in forwarding their businesses and serving them well. When you care for others, I don't think it ever works against you.
I think it's a really underrated concept, kindness, in the current climate.
Yeah.
Politically, there's a lot going on that we probably won't touch on, but I think it is interesting how, we're seeing people who want to do more now for others with very little expectation, little to no expectation in return. And it is actually a really nice trait. I think the only downside I have for kindness, and I'm going to caveat with I'm not a complete heartless person, but the only downside I do see is that sometimes we get so caught up in giving to everybody else that we forget to also look at what we can produce for ourselves. As a business owner, sometimes we have to also recognize that we get to spend time giving to others, but we need to be giving back to ourselves as well. I mean, how would you describe that? Because that's something you've been able to do really well over the years.
Yeah, well, I would consider that scenario martyrdom. And what I see there is we give without considering ourselves, and we actually hurt ourselves, which then compromises our ability to give because we don't have revenue or sustainability. And so it actually compromises ourselves. So I don't think marketing ourselves and offering something which generates revenue is a bad thing whatsoever. I think actually it's a necessary and important thing. I beg people to make as much money as possible, not from a greed standpoint, but from a sustainability standpoint and a service standpoint. The more you make, the better you serve. So, with the efforts I make in my books, I aggressively market myself, but I hope through kindness and self-deprecation and honesty, but I'm relentless with it too. It's not like I'm like, oh, the world will just serve me and let me just sit back and just hope that people realize that I write books. I'm like, no, I'm going to go out there and actively do it. But always rooted in, is it of service to my readership? Am I being kind and thoughtful and putting their best interests first? I always consider that. And I F that up. I screw that up big time. Like occasionally I'll do something like, oh, I really didn't consider my readers first. I was just thinking of how I could gain. And then I have to, repair that and fix it. But because I put that thought out first, I'm 99% of the time just being of service. And I've had readers come to me saying, I've been following your stuff for 10 years. I haven't read a thing. And now I'm taking that first dive in. So authorship has a very long tail to it. I suspect, Jessica, you may have books that you've heard of over the years, kind of drip in and drip out of your life through conversations, and maybe never made the purchase, but then all of a sudden you decide to pick it up because it's kind of been welling up and building up. So we do it to market ourselves for the long haul, but I feel I just need to root my work in kindness and being of service, and almost as a yin to that yang to be relentless in what I can do to be of service to my clients and make them aware of that and my readers.
Yeah, because it's effectively one of the things I'm always saying to my audience is, it's selfish not to. If you don't go out there and you don't market it, somebody else is going to put out information that might not be their best fit. It might not be in their best interest, and they might lose out. And whose fault is that? It's not theirs. They went and they searched out information proactively, but you hadn't put it out there yet. You hadn't given them the opportunity to actually buy it or see it. And so, I think there's definitely something to be said for having that relentless pursuit of not only creating something that's amazing and that serves your reader once they've got it, but also being committed to marketing that so it can get in the hands of as many people as possible and help as many people as possible.
I had a wake-up call around this, and I won't mention the person's name because the circumstances, which I'll share, were kind of unique. So he may not want his name shared. But I was visiting this person who had relative fame in the internet marketing community, and I had just become an author and was talking about marketing, the intention of marketing. And we're playing pool at his house together, just me and him. And he said, I got to take pause here and ask you a question, Mike. And I said, yes. He said, the book you're writing and the work you're doing, do you feel it is of the best of yourself? Is your best content? I said, absolutely. He says, is it better than some of the alternatives exist? Particularly, he says, those snake oil salesmen and those slimy people who are just trying to sell something for the quick buck, the info marketers who, you see that the video with the jet behind them in the Lamborghini, both that they've staged and rented. He goes, is your content and what you're providing through your books and through your other work, is it of better service to those people? I said, yes. He goes, well, you have to realize this, Mike, that these consumers need to buy a solution. And if you're better, and that's when he lit up his joint. That's when I'm not sure his name. He lights up this joint, takes a big puff and blows in my face. He goes, ooh. He goes, Mike, you then have the effing responsibility to outsell the snake oil salesman. You have a better product. You're a better service. He goes, screw you, Mike. If you're not going to market yourself aggressively, you have a responsibility to do it. And I don't know if it was the contact buzz I got off that joint or just the point he was making, but it was very clear to me. That was a turning moment in my life that I will forever be relentless in the marketing of my products, my books, when I truly feel to the core of my being that is superior to any alternative, that it is of the best service to my readership. And I suspect for everyone listening in right now, Jessica, if you're going to write a book one day, or you have a book and or maybe you already have one out there, if it's truly the best of you, there's a community that needs it. And if it's the best of you, that means it's better than many alternatives out there that are just stitched together slime. And therefore, damn it, you have a responsibility to market the living crap out of it.
I love that. I really love that. Thank you so much. That's amazing. I think there's one thing, just one thing that I wanted to touch on just for everybody, because I think it's so important when we talk about doing the right work and, focusing on what's going to serve our audience at the highest level, that we actually give ourselves space to do the right work. And there's one thing in your book, Clockwork, which I loved, called the Queen Bee role, which, I've told all my clients about. I've bought multiple clients' books to make sure that they go and read about it. But how can people create the space to give themselves that QBR, that Queen Bee role, and feel like they are contributing to something, especially if it's a long project like a book, that is going to make that massive difference in the end? Because sometimes you can feel guilty about it. You can feel like it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
How do you keep that effort sustained on that activity?
Yeah. So let me explain what the QBR is, and then I'll tell you how to keep that sustainability. So the QBR, I was studying business efficiency, individual efficiency. This could be solopreneurs or a large organization or anything in between. And what I found is that every business that is efficient understands what its most critical activity is. It's a singular activity within a business that the business is hinging its success on. I called it the QBR because I saw this first in nature. Beehives are very efficient in their use of their energy. And every bee in that organization, of a beehive, that's air quotes, every bee in that organization knows that if the queen bee role is not being served, the hive is in jeopardy. And the queen bee role in a beehive is the production of eggs. So every bee knows that if eggs aren't being produced, we have a collective issue. And the queen bee happens to be the bee serving that role. But I'm not suggesting she's the most important bee. They all play equal importance. If the queen bee fails to produce, they'll spawn a new queen bee and replace her. But every bee knows that it doesn't matter if you're out collecting pollen or if you're defending the hive. If we're not producing eggs, that's our first focus. And then you go off and do your other job functions. Well, as authors or aspiring authors, that when it comes to a book, once you say that the most important thing we're doing is writing a book, everything else has to play second fiddle to the production of that. That's the putting your soul into it. You must put your soul into it to produce the best of yourself. And I'm not saying everything else gets ignored. I'm saying the priority is writing. So this morning, I got up at 5:30 this morning and I started to write. And I don't always get up at 5:30 in the morning, but I always make sure that my book is the priority. Actually, after we're done with this call, I'm spending the next 3 hours working on my book. I have other things to do, which I will continue to do, but never to the compromise of writing my book. So that's the prioritization, the most important activity. That's your QBR. And for authors, I believe it's the creation of a great book. And then the QBR will shift to marketing. Question is, of course, is because it's such a long process, how do you stay on it? And at least for me, I found it's out of purpose. This is different than passion. Passion, I think, is something that gives us joy. But I think passion can wane. We do something for a period of time. It's like, okay, that's enough for today. I'm done with that. I'm passionate about playing guitar, but I play it for about a half hour or an hour. And I'm like, okay, that's enough for today. I can put it down. Purpose, I think, is something I consider a calling. That can be self-given. It can be God-given. You define what a calling is. But purpose is something that is almost magnetic. The more that you do, it actually builds energy. And I'm not saying natural energy. At the end of the day, if all I'm doing is working my books, I'm exhausted physically, but the mental energy has increased. So purpose is something that, as it's executed upon, it actually builds energy. Purpose, I also found, is often rooted in trauma or life events. So sadly, I suspect many people listening in, probably everyone listening in, has experienced some form of trauma in their life. It could have been abuse or something like that. It could have been an accident or a life-changing moment, a passing of a loved one or something. It could be a drip of trauma where you were picked on or made fun of as a child for a long period of time. Those moments are so imprinted on our mind that I think there's a calling to resolve that, to say, I'm not going to stand for this anymore for myself or for anyone else. And that resolution, I think, becomes a calling. Other times it's dream-based. As a kid, I've always wanted to be X, or I've always wanted to do Y, and it hasn't been fulfilled. I think that becomes a purpose of how do we fulfill that or address that. I think once you have clarity on that purpose, that call to resolve it becomes that magnet pulls you forward. For me, it became very clear one of my traumas was losing all my money, wiping ourselves out financially in my early 30s. And we lost our house over it. We lost our possessions. Devastated my family. And the reason was I didn't understand entrepreneurship. It's triggered me to resolve this. And it's such a strong calling. I believe this will be for the rest of my life. I feel called to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. This perception that the day you start a business that you're wildly successful, but the reality is the struggle, financial struggle, time struggle, sacrifice. I want to close that gap, committed to it. And honestly, I'm doing it for myself. I need to live through it for myself. And I need to make sure that no one else has to live through that trauma. That's my purpose. And I wake up in mornings saying, I just don't want to write today. I don't want to work on my book today. I don't feel it. And I just sit there for a second and think about, why am I on this planet? I've defined it as eradicating entrepreneurial poverty, and say, okay, let's get to it, Mike. And I'm pushing forward again. Define that purpose for yourself. And I think that becomes the ultimate energy source for the long slog of writing a book and marketing it.
I love that. Thank you so much. Seriously, this has been amazing. I know that everybody is going to want to, share their key takeaways with you on social, but where can they find you? Where's the best place for them to find you if they want more Mike in their lives, which I'm sure, like I do, of course, they want more Mike.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't want more Mike? Right? So if it's okay, I'll give you two sources, because I think one's relevant specifically to authors, and then I'll give you my contact info.
Perfect.
Okay. So this is pure coincidence, and it's happening imminently. So it may, when this broadcasts, it's happening in June, but I am doing a teaching. This is the first time on a main stage doing this, and it may be the only time, at least for the foreseeable future. But I believe in authorship so much that I believe everyone that is considering a book or has a book and is really putting their life's effort into making it extraordinary, needs to market it well. So I'm doing an event with 2 other experts called Author Up Live. So it's AUTHOR, Author Up, like UP, and then Live, LIVE. So authoruplive.com is this event I'm doing. It's a 2-day event in the US and inviting aspiring and established authors to come here to really learn how to prepare a book that's extraordinary and then how to market it so the world takes notice. So that's authoruplive.com. And I'd love to invite anyone listening in that's interested to check it out. I'd love to work with you personally. And then the kind of the mecca for what I do is MikeMichalowicz.com. Now, here's the caveat. My last name is impossible to spell and to pronounce. So I have a shortcut. It's MikeMotorbike.com. That was my nickname. That was my nickname in high school. It was Mike Motorbike. The irony, Jessica, I've never driven a motorcycle. I don't aspire to. But I did buy the domain because that was my nickname. So you can go to MikeMotorbike.com. And on my site, you'll discover my books. There's chapter downloads. I used to write for the Wall Street Journal for years. All that content's for free. And I'm a podcaster and a blogger also.
That's amazing. And if you get onto the website and you do not see a photo of Mike riding a Harley, you're in the right place.
Exactly. You know that's Mike Motorbike because there's no motorcycles. That's fine.
Somebody's selling a ton of motorbikes that he's like, yeah, Mike Michalowicz has definitely ridden all of these.
That's funny.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know that all of the poddies will as well. And you guys, if you've had an epic takeaway listening to this episode, which I'm sure you have, please make sure you head over onto social media and let us know what it was. It's always good to know that you're having good conversations. And seriously, make sure that you jump over to MikeMotorbike.com and Author Up as well, because those are going to be phenomenal resources for you on your journey towards business efficiency and authoring, which I'm very excited. You may actually see me at the Author Up. I may be there.
It'd be a privilege. Plus, we got to grab a drink together then too. It'd be nice to see my sister from another mister.
Exactly that. 2 people with difficultly, is that even a word? Difficultly pronouncing surnames.
Yeah, I think it is right.
We're going to make it one. Thank you so much. And you guys, if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you do all of the relevant, subscribe, share, and let us know how it went on social. And I'll see you in Monday's episode.